Okay, this is the Internet Court of Truth and Lies. Its function is to allow somebody who believes that something is a lie or believes that something is the truth to take the matter to essentially 8 jurors. And the way it takes the matter to the 8 jurors is he answers 8 questions, which are designed to allow you to dissect any truth or any lie. It's a standard set of 8 questions, which is never the perfect 8 questions. But the function of the thing is to create an environment of what's called enforced moderated dialogue, which is to keep the dialogue between people on track and to provide a mechanism that social media could use as a tool to allow people to be able to say something in social media and then have a dialogue with other people about it, not necessarily listen to the comments that are written to them, which tend to be not very useful. Today's trial, I'm the plaintiff. This is a trial based on articles that I wrote on medium.com. This is an article that I wrote on August the 17th, 2020, which is 5 years ago. It was about an event that happened when I was in Washington, D.C. I can't remember why I was in Washington, but Pittsburgh is only a 4-hour drive to Washington. I spend a lot of time in Washington. I would always stay in a little Holiday Inn just off the quad in Washington, D.C., which is a very inexpensive Holiday Inn and very nice. And you can wake up in the morning, and if you jog or walk, you can walk directly out on the quad, approximately where the United States House of Representatives is. And if you're jogging, you can jog around the quad, which is what I did. And where this picture came from, I took that picture with my iPhone at about 5:30 in the morning, I think, because I had some kind of meeting that day. I was active with the Department of Justice, which is right next to the House of Representatives. We were working with the House on, believe it or not, the Internet Court of Truth and Lies. All that kind of disappeared with COVID, but I would meet with congressmen and so forth and talk to them about it. And this is before we really had anything. We just had something that we wanted for people to think about. So I wrote this article, and it's really about one of the findings in Mendacology, which is the study of truth and lies, that basically says that you should never vote for a divisive liar, promote a divisive liar. The reason behind that is that if somebody is a divisive liar, in other words, they're bad mouthing other people and they're not telling the truth, and it's clear that they're intentionally not telling the truth. They're just feel good about bad mouthing other people. They've learned that bad mouthing other people will get them power and they can control other people that way by soliciting people to also think bad things about those other people. It turns out that divisive lying is a characteristic marker for any psychopath. Actually, it's a characteristic marker for a sociopath as well. It's one of the things they just do. It's a demonstration of a lack of empathy for other people. What I had found was that Paul, who wrote several of the books, or they were written associated with him somehow. And Paul had Ephesians 4:25 said the same thing. He said, don't ever promote a divisive liar. I used one of the translations of the Bible where his statement on Ephesians 4:25 was pretty clear English. So he said, "Stop telling lies. Let us tell our neighbors the truth, for we're all parts of the same body." In other words, don't tell divisive lies. By the way, this is one of the few times the term lies is used in the Bible. Paul used it. One of the places I used to visit was Greece. I would be in a hotel next to the mountain, which is Athens is where the Parthenon is. I'd run up to the top of the mountain and then run back down, have breakfast. One of the things I saw there was on your way up the mountain, there's a rock, which is where Paul would come and preach after he had left Israel. I mentioned that in this. People will say, and I think this is correct, that Paul was the guy who really defined Christianity. He was considered the founder of the church, even though he never really formed a church. He just gave talks throughout Southern Europe and the Mideast, or sermons, whatever you want to call them. In running around that day in Washington, D.C., the flag was at half mast. I found out it was this guy named Billy Graham had died. This is one of the first times that the flag had flown at half mast, basically for a minister. Billy Graham, I don't know how many of y'all know of him, but he was a very real Christian. He had a very large following and so forth and so on, but he was not one of those get-rich guys. He was very genuine. What I'm arguing here in the trial is that Paul and George Washington told us not to divisively lie. A divisive lie is any lie that divides one portion of our humanity from the rest, or one portion of the country from the rest, or one group of people from the rest of people. It's a real tell. If you encounter somebody that's doing this, there's a very high likelihood you're encountering a sociopath. A sociopath is a very broad category, or a psychopath, which is a very narrow category. We think that about 10 to 20% of the people anywhere in the world are sociopaths. That's a very small percentage which are psychopaths. But everybody's had the experience of encountering people. And of course, we see that every day with Trump. The part of the argument is that it's not only Paul that said don't divisively lie, and he said it for the reason that we're one body. In other words, he's saying that don't divisively lie because we shouldn't be divided. George Washington said this, and this is literally the beginning of his farewell address, where he sets up what the entire farewell address is about. George Washington wrote this, 1796 or something. I don't know the exact date, but he wrote it. It took him 2 years during his presidency to write the thing. This was, in fact, the farewell he gave to the American people when he finished his presidency and retired to his home in Mount Vernon, never to come back into politics again. And so what he said was, and this is the beginning of the farewell address, which is a fairly long document. Your welfare urges me to offer the result of much reflection, which appear to me all important. In other words, I'm fixing to tell you that is really important. From different quarters, many artifices will be employed to weaken your minds covertly and insidiously directed. And I'm arguing that he meant from many quarters, you're going to hear people divisively lying. And the reason it's divisive lying and not just lying is the third paragraph, where he says, "You should watch for your preservation with zealous anxiety, indignantly frowning upon the first dawning of every attempt to alienate any portion of our country from the rest." He's now defined what kind of lies are bad. This is my case, that I've got them basically in writing saying eschew divisive lie. Do not tolerate it. And certainly don't promote people or listen to people who divisively lie, because you'll get yourself into trouble. At the end of the thing, I just say I'm a George Washington libertarian, which I am. If you want to know what George Washington libertarian is, read his farewell address. He believed in liberty, that the government's principal responsibility is to allow people freedom to act within the law. And I don't like extremes of faction or party. Neither did George Washington join no party. He said in his farewell, essentially, I wish there were no parties because parties are bad, but it's inevitable that parties will form in any government. That's the reason I'm warning. Don't listen to the people in either party who are divisively lying, because you've got some people who can create real problems for the government. Because if people get in positions of power and start violating the Constitution or the norms that are established, then you get yourself into the failure of the democracy itself. George Washington was not saying this from nowhere. He was educated, as were many of the founders, on the history of government. And it goes back to Plato, who said basically democracies inevitably fail into oligarchies, which inevitably fail into dictatorships when a single person rises to the top of the oligarchy. Once you have a dictatorship, finding your way back to a democracy is very difficult. That was Plato over 2,000 years ago saying that. So that's my case. I said this just in plain language. Both those people said, don't listen to people who divisively lie. I think it's 100%. Is it the whole truth? I said 90%, and I said yes. This is a very simple statement. It means a very simple thing. They're very clear about it. Is it nothing but the truth? It was the subject of one of Paul's sermons. Paul is in several books of the Bible, a number of them. This is.
I think he's only in the Acts of the Apostles.
Yes.
He only appears after Christ's death.
Yeah. You're exactly right. There are two Pauls, which I always forget who the other Paul was, but he was much later or something, Andrew. I can't remember. Anyway, he's one of the apostles.
Yeah.
And I think two of the apostles went around giving sermons, and Paul was the principal that went all over the place. I think he actually lived in Rome for a while as well.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
He was shipwrecked, wasn't he?
Yeah. Something like that. I basically said there's no deceit. These guys are historically correct. The history goes back 2,000 years. Time and time again, this has been a lesson that has to be relearned over and over again. It's so effective to get power, which is what we talked about last week. Is the deceit truth intended? The truth of this statement is intended. I believe that Paul and George Washington were very clear. This was not a minor thing they were saying. What's the motivation? I said it's just to be informative. The motivation is hopefully convince everyone never to lie. It's okay to say divisive truths. So nobody said you can't say bad things about people that are true. They said you just can't tell bad things about people that are not true, or tell bad things about people with the motivation to deceive them, whether it's true or false. So there are various ways you can lie, but the mark of a divisive liar that you have to have him knowing he's lying, which we see with Trump, because when he's caught, he will often say he was exaggerating or something, or the news media will say this was an exaggeration. What's the social acceptability of the truth or lie? I thought that this is so well understood in the history of humanity, mankind, throughout the world, that it's why doesn't everybody know this? What label would improve the social acceptability? I said this is also the main theme of George Washington's farewell address, which I just said there. And what we'll do is we'll go through the jurors, ask each juror to 20 to 30-second summary of their verdict. In particular, if you disagree with me, I would love to hear it, although I doubt if you're going to be able to convince me to change my mind at this point. I wrote this paper 5 years ago and I've been living with it, so I'm unlikely to change my mind. On the other hand, I would love to hear what other people say. I really get very little of that kind of feedback. What I'd like to do, if I can figure out how to do this, is juror one.
That's me. And again, don't get upset with me because I use ChatGPT and stuff with it. I looked it up because I know I had never really heard the term divisively lie in the Bible. I'm sure it's there, but I'd never heard it myself, and I've been back and forth. But I like Paul the Apostle. I really like his teachings and stuff. But when I looked it up, it said neither Paul or George Washington used the exact phrase divisively lie, but both addressed the importance of truthfulness and unity and warned against division and actions or speech. And Paul urged believers to be united in Christ, reflecting on Jesus' humility and putting aside selfish interests for the good of the community.
Divisive lying has not really been used because there's so many other ways to say it. And Paul in Ephesians said it one way, George Washington said it. There's so many different ways to say it. I've gone in circles around an alternative description. I've settled on divisively lie because there's a lot of other kinds of lies. Some of them are bad, but none of them are this kind of lie that has such social destruction associated with it by way of people gaining power and harming the liberty of other people. Juror two.
Hello. I agree with all of your verdicts, and I just summarize it by saying we all come from the same source. We should not support those who divisively lie. And that's really all I can say about it.
I'm glad. I feel the same way. That's the reason this paper was so short. Juror three.
Okay, basically, I agree with George and Paul, and also we are taught that, most of us, I would assume, since birth, we were taught not to lie. I mean, that's the first time I know I was taught, and then again, it's reiterated in the church when you're getting the teachings in the church, not to lie, right or wrong. That's why I agree with it, because we're taught, we know better, but we do wrong. You know what I'm saying? I mean,
what
is to damage someone? You know what I'm saying? It's evil almost.
Yeah.
There's white lies, like little white lies, like how does my hair look, or does this outfit look okay? And you're gonna say yes to be polite, even if it doesn't, unless I'm well enough to say that. That to me is a white lie.
Yeah. The taxonomy of lies, the taxonomical scheme associated with lies can separate different classes of lies out. There's only one class of lie that is divisive lying. I think my church, which was a Methodist church, taught people not to lie, but they didn't discriminate divisive lying from other. They would say it's okay for little white lies, but there's actually dozens of types of lies. The problem is that they don't teach the lies that Paul is describing as bad. This is really one of the few uses of the term lie in the Bible, and or George Washington was calling bad. I wish they would teach that particular kind of lying as bad and say that's the one that you most should be concerned about, because you don't want people who divisively lie in positions of authority, because you may become the person lied about, and you probably will be. Yeah.
To credibility, don't you think? Once a person's deceived you, I don't trust them anymore. I believe anything they say.
That's right. Again, it's okay to divisively tell the truth, which is weird, but just simply telling the truth and that actually causing people to be divided is nothing you can do much about because you told the truth. It's something to be careful about, so you try not to divide people with the truth unless you know it's the truth. Most people, vast majority of people, I think, do precisely that. They don't lie divisively. They will occasionally tell the truth, but when that divides people. But when they do, they're careful about it, not to have a terrible impact on other people unless it's extremely deserving and everybody agrees, except for some small subset and so forth and so on. Juror 4?
Oh, yeah, that's me. I got a little bit confused because I took the title of your paper more literally, and I started to think about whether Christianity is specifically suited, that it's not dying in the US. On the contrary, it's specifically suited to US economic conditions and philosophy. I was looking at the millionaire pastors, all of whom, interestingly, the top 10 millionaire pastors in the States, all of whom started and founded their own churches, like innovators, entrepreneurs, but in a different area. And 57% of all millionaires are in Christian cultures, and only 6.5 are Muslim, for example. So yes, the US culture is specifically suited to Christianity and the prosperity philosophy and all that stuff. However, now I realize more about what you were really wanting to talk about. And I can't help thinking religion is a very interesting choice, because even though there's a pretense of brotherhood, they're very much concerned with dividing each other. Religions are not ecumenical at all. They're very concerned about their own particular philosophies, and they positively affirm their own tenets of belief to the extent that they're dividing one group from another, one religious group from another.
I can't remember whether I mentioned this earlier to you, but I was paid $8 million to put all the churches in North America on the web back in 1996 and 97. We did. One of the first things we did was I got a list of every church in North America and every denomination in North America. And I'm trying to remember the exact numbers, but there's something like 200 or 300 denominations, the vast majority of which are Christian. What we did was we preloaded a website with a web page or 4 web pages for every church in North America. And all the church had to do was assign a secretary or the pastor to fill out the web pages, which was basically the weekly bulletin for the church. We got off the churches within 6 months, we had 113,000 churches editing every week. And the way we did it was the money was spent meeting with the heads of all the denominations we could get to. And so I would meet with 3 or 4 denominations a week kind of thing. The head of the denomination would have a techie with him. And sometimes there would be 3 people on the call. And my objective was to get the head of the denomination to email or otherwise contact all of the pastors of all the churches in that denomination and give them the link to go to their church and fill out the weekly bulletin. And that's how we got essentially, it's 113,000, I think it was a third of all the churches in North America editing weekly. But what I learned was there are denominations that fit your characterization, which I would call problematic as to whether or not they had any Christians in them. Okay. But there are also some denominations that are really Christian. And you don't hear about them very much because they're really Christian. One of the denominations that I gained a lot of respect for was something called the Church of Christ, which is very good. Another one, Assembly of God, that denomination is real Christians. So part of the Assembly of God is if you want to establish a church in the United States as an Assembly of God church, you must establish an Assembly of God church in a foreign country that will become your sister or brother church. So every Assembly of God church has a sister or brother church in a foreign country. The deal is they swap people. So people from Kazakhstan live there in America, and some of the people in America live some of their lives in Kazakhstan to bring people together.
Well,
that is the rule, not a give in that particular denomination.
right.
Every church will have a brother or sister church in some other country.
Yeah.
And that's the way it works. They're not evangelical at all. It's just they just teach the people in the church that people are people.
I think that, I mean, that's marvelous. I hadn't heard of that church and what they do. I was thinking about just one major religion and another dividing each other up so that they can't merge.
And so there's a very large number of denominations that are like that. I wrote a book on this, which I never published, but it's the breakdown of the denominations. Actually, you can go and find, I think if you Wikipedia Christian denominations or something, you'll get a list, but it won't be a complete list. But what we had was actually a complete list. And the way we had the complete list, y'all will be amazed. This is back in '96. We were surfing the web for the address for every church in the world and what the name of the church was. And we found a database on the CIA website, which has been long removed.
Yeah.
Which contained the latitude, longitude coordinates of every building or house on Earth.
You're kidding. Really?
Wow. Yes. And they were labeled. And so you could actually go to that database and you could search the term church.
Wow.
And that's how we got our list.
My goodness. I use the CIA World Factbook quite a lot, but it's very denatured stuff. It's not real.
Yeah. So I was smart enough that when I first saw it, before I did anything else, I downloaded the entire database.
Yeah.
And because I knew that it wasn't going to stay, because the second some manager at the CIA saw that, they'd say, that shouldn't be on the web. But that's where we got all the churches, easily all the churches in North America, Mexico, and Canada. And throughout the world, we had, to the extent that we could know how to select the right term to get churches. Most of the time it's easy, but in some other countries it's a bit harder. But you could find, as long as they had a building, we had them.
And my God, that database and the Mormon database and all the souls they've saved. My God.
Yeah. The Mormon church was my backup for their database, but I couldn't get them to give it to me. I was not a Mormon.
No.
God, you got me searching now for this. I'm gonna find it. I'm gonna see if I can find it somewhere on here.
You can't find it. It's all gone. No. My website was called Houses of Worship. And ultimately, the funders, the guys who gave me the $8 million, were not Christians. They said they were Christians. It's a long story, but the bottom line was destroyed the effort.
Yeah.
I'll tell you why they destroyed the effort, because I said that synagogues are churches. And they said, you're not allowed to put Jews on our site.
Oh, wow.
And Muslim.
Don't even think about it. And I had everybody. I had the synagogues, I had the mosques, and all this other stuff. They absolutely forced us to remove them. The original version of the system, they were there. And when these guys detected that they were there, they ordered them gone. I spent 6 months fighting them on that. And ultimately, they just stopped the funding because I wouldn't delete the synagogues. And I said, those are houses of worship too. And they said, we don't tolerate that. And I said, okay. They took the houses of worship away from me within a week after they had taken it away from the group here in Pittsburgh that was running it. They deleted all the other religions. And the number of pastors that were editing went from 113,000 to less than 20,000 in 2 weeks. The word got out. Jurify or ask if
Yeah, that's me, Bob. Yeah, I'm not Christian, but yeah, look, I agree with the accusation, and yeah, obviously, to lie divisively is a problem. But I just wanted to challenge you on lying, the opposite of that. What was it? Telling the truth.
lying,
Divisively.
so telling the truth. If I tell you that somebody did something and I'm telling you the truth and they really did do it, okay, but it's divisive, that's okay. That doesn't make you a sociopath. That's not a marker for being a sociopath. And of course, as a scientist, I'm used to telling people the truth and not being believed and it causing problems.
You could be telling the truth, but the next person would see that as a lie.
That's
They
exactly
would see
right.
that as a divisive lie.
And so they may not like me, and that'd be okay. But I know that other people will recognize that you tell the truth, except for people who don't like what you're saying. Okay. But generally speaking, people see through that one. And it doesn't harm society for people who tell the truth and divide
Look,
society.
it doesn't even change society. If we have to say Trump is a sociopath or a psychopath, it's not changing the world in any way.
No, because it's true.
Honestly. But it's not changing, it's not really dividing it.
No, but to Trump's people, it's dividing it. I am positive of that. I know some MAGA people who tell me I should shut up, stop lying about it. I say, wait a minute. They know he lies, by the way. So juror 6.
Hi, Bob. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
So I agree with what you were saying with the lie and what you were adding on to telling the truth and not lying. If we look at history going on before time, things can change over course and people can change things what actually occurred. So when I look at it as well, like where I'm based in Port Elizabeth, there's like a lot of religions that use the persona of Christianity, but they push their own agenda. So what I see it as, they just use it as a power hunger. Oh, I'm getting followers. They must worship me. So the reason why I think they lie a lot is because they want to keep the people where they want them and they control them. That's how I see it, my point of view. It happens a lot in all religions here in PE, including Islam, Muslims. It happens a lot. So when I look at these things, I tell myself, okay, what am I following right now? Because they just change it every day. So
That's right.
I do agree with.
Yeah. So one of the other churches that I encountered that's truly a Christian church is, believe it or not, and this is an official denomination, is the Salvation Army. I don't know if y'all knew that. They are a church, and they were formed in Britain in the mid 1800s. They're worldwide, and their mission is to give the homeless hope. That's what they do. Basically all they do. But they are officially a church denomination. I've actually slept over when I didn't have any money, and I found myself in Toronto, Canada, and I had to sleep somewhere. I went to a Salvation Army, and they give you a bed, they give you food, and they have a service every night for a few minutes, which you don't have to even go to, but they do a little service. And so they're officially a church. And I would argue they're a good Christian church. And I'm sure there's an equivalent in the Islamic community, but I don't know the equivalent. Oh, do y'all know what the largest Christian church in the world is?
Is it the Church of Christ?
No. So depending on how you count it, but the largest by number of people in the same branch. So Catholicism is a lot of different churches. You have to realize that the way they're run is, even though there's one pope, this kind of thing, there are a lot of different ones. But it's the Chinese house church, which is 500 million people.
Dang.
They have no buildings. It's under the governmental radar. They're not organized the way you think, but it is
I
a
have to
thing.
look that up.
Yeah, it's called the Chinese house church.
790 million Chinese claim not to belong to any church. So it's interesting.
There are places in China where they built churches, but it's not a house church via some other denomination. But the house churches, yeah.
It is interesting because China has demanded, and the Catholic Church has given in, to choose the bishops, the Catholic bishops and things in the church, because China wants total control over every religion.
Yeah, so this is the one that runs under the radar of the government. And it's been around for a long time, like over 100 years. Juror 7.
Hello, everyone. I mostly agreed with everything that you actually said. I am for humanity, and I feel like lying against someone or trying to separate one portion from the other, it's actually wrong. So I'm for that. But at the same time, I think I can forgive a white lie. But to add on what Drew 16, I'm actually from Dispatch in South Africa. I think it's 15 minutes away from where he stays, which is Port Elizabeth. And what he was actually saying is actually true. You'd find that our churches here, they actually look down on each, and they're always looking at you like if you are from, because I am from the MCSA, which is the Methodist of South Africa. And they actually look at you, if from my church, if I'm from my church and I look at the other person that goes to church in Assemblies of God, I look at them as if they are not really worthy of being Christians. And how South Africans are looking down on the very church that was actually found in South Africa, which is Zion. It's like you have demons if you go to that church, which is, I really don't get it, because looking down on one person to the other is also seen wrong, because you are supposed to love. If you have this, I think Paul says in the Galatians, you should bear spiritual fruits. So I just don't also understand what is going on there. Yeah, I was actually agreeing with Drew 6 that there's a lot going on from our side when it comes to Christianity. But also, if you stand for your truth, if you know why you chose Christianity, then you will choose your path and you go with your path, basically.
Juror 8.
Hi, Robert. I'm also from Port Elizabeth. This is a coincidence today. So for me, this case was very interesting because for me, I created a case, but obviously I'm still waiting for a slot, which was about lying, actually. It was about men lie 46% more than females. With you, yeah, they said there that men lie due to ego,
That's not
and
true.
females lie to protect family and friends. With your input and your article that you wrote, I'm going to use part of that also in my case, because some of it was very interesting. And then some of the things that you said about the methodical liars, that's something that new that I'm learning about. You must watch out for people, what they actually say.
Yeah, it's a very bad thing to your country if a psychopath becomes the king. That is a very bad thing. Okay, that never ends well. And the tell for a sociopath or psychopath is they divisively lie. It doesn't definitively tell you've got one, but it's pretty much non-existent that a psychopath does not lie. Every psychopath will lie. Sociopaths, maybe not, okay, but it's very common with sociopaths, and it's a tell that they lack empathy. The definition of sociopath or psychopath is somebody who lacks empathy. The difference is a psychopath murderously lacks empathy. He doesn't care if he kills people and will kill people if given a chance. And that's a psychopath. You can imagine that lying is a sure tell that the person lacks empathy. So you see how that all fits together. I guess that's everybody. What I wanted to show y'all on the site, I think we showed this last week too. If you go to your dashboard, you'll see that there's a sponsor for some trials. And there are two sponsors right now. One's Bright Plaza, the other one's me. And the trials that I sponsor are just the trials that are on my article. So every trial that's in this list is one of my articles. And I've got about 200 articles, so I can go for a couple of years before I'll deplete all of my articles. And I'm unfortunately still writing more, so maybe I'll never stop. But next week, we'll go into a money-making scheme that's within our business plan for getting sponsors. We're going to change things. We're not going to change things a lot. We're going to provide a mechanism by which we may be able to get some sponsor money in to allow us to get the business started so that we can do this in a sustainable way for a long time. I'll cover that next week.